Alright, so I got another NPC upgrade build for you guys today, and today we're looking at Rokumonsen's SHINOBI AC. And what are the main issues with this build? Honestly, not much. The internals aren't the best. The Rensetsu AR is not a particularly good weapon for this build, so I've swapped that out of course, and that's really about it. Other than that, it's a pretty solid build all around. This is, just by default, a build with a lot of combo potential. The Haldeman and the plasma thrower, of course, just work together very well because the Haldeman doesn't knock enemies away when you hit them with it, so it's a great combo tool. And the javelin beta as well, if used well, can also be used in a combo. It's not easy to do, but something you can do is fire your javelin beta and get a stagger with your offhand weapon. In this case, I switched to the Sampu. Lots of really good options here, but I went with the Sampu for reasons I'll get into later. But fire the javelin beta, get a stagger with Sampu, you hit them with the Haldeman, and then like around the same time, the javelin beta would be going off, right? So you get hit by that, and then you get them with the plasma thrower, double swing, right? Silly amounts of damage output potential, really good in that regard. Of course, lining that up isn't super easy. Your opponent has to kind of cooperate a little bit as well, of course, but you can definitely do it. But it's very easy just to get something like a Haldeman shot into the double plasma thrower, right? Very good. Tons of damage output on direct hits, right? And that's kind of the main reason for switching out the Rensetsu AR, is you really just want something to generate stagger. So the Sampu is pretty good in that regard. It's kind of fitting theme-wise. I did consider the Etsujin, but I feel like I've been using it a lot recently, and I wanted to use the Sampu again. Obviously, if I wanted to like truly go fully optimal here, I would use the Viento. But I decided kind of to keep it a bit more in theme, right? And yeah, that's really all there is to say about for that combo I mentioned. You'll be able to see me use it against Swinburne in the gameplay footage near the end. I put it after the Rokumonsen fight. So yeah, stick around for that. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the details. Getting the weapons, I've only made one change here, but let's go over everything as always. Now, first we've got the Haldeman shotgun. Now, this separates itself from the Zimmerman in terms of it just primarily being a combo tool, right? We're serving as a better combo tool than the Zimmerman because unlike the Zimmerman, it doesn't knock opponents back if you shoot them while they're staggered. So you can just continue your combo into something else, right? Unimpeded. But it's quite good for generating stagger as well. It's got a really short real time 1.3. Doesn't have like the hugest like damage and impact per shot, but because you can fire it so often, right, it makes up for it. And it's got a pretty good impact to cumulative impact ratio as well. And the primary downside of the Haldeman comes, of course, in the form of the range. Way less forgiving than the Zimmerman is in that regard, but we have a nice fast build here that can kind of make up for that, right? Now moving on, we've got the plasma thrower, the hammer. Now this is a fantastic melee weapon. It's not my favorite on bipeds, to be honest. I don't really like it on bipeds. Now, fortunately on this build, we're primarily just using it for direct hit damage. You can obviously use it in neutral, but because again, we're on a biped, it's not quite as effective as it would be, say, on a tetrapod, because, it doesn't have a melee lunge of any kind, right? And it's kind of one of the main reasons, because I've talked about this before, that I don't really like doing weapon swaps without like a really specific purpose, right? And this is kind of one of those exceptions, right? Because we're using the hammer, and just not that great on bipeds in terms of neutral play, right? Fantastic damage dealer, but we've got the Sampu on the back, we can switch to it. And of course, it's good from time to time just to switch out the hammer and just slap that out in neutral as well. And if you're not using it very often in neutral, you can really catch your opponent off guard with that, right? So definitely don't just use it for directed damage, but try not to go too crazy with it because your opponent's probably going to avoid it. Now moving on, we've got the Javelin Beta Missile Launcher. Now I absolutely love this thing. It's way better than you might think. You hit opponents way more often, like even other players way more often than you might think. I really love this thing, I really do. It's fortunate that the lock time is on the long side, and it's got a fairly short reload time to make up for that, I guess. But yeah, I absolutely like the Javelin Beta a lot. I've used it in a previous build, in the solo build, where I paired it with the VPMs. Absolutely fantastic combo, really love it. Now moving on, we finally get to the change I made. The Sampu handgun from the original Rensetsu AR, right? And I decided to stick with a burst weapon, and I was basically considering between either switching to the SRG or the Sampu. And I'm gonna be honest, the main reason is just it feels like I've been using the SRG quite a bit recently, and I've only used the Sampu in like one of these builds ever, right? And it's kind of fitting theme wise as a boss weapon. Obviously, he's RLF associated, so boss weapons are kind of in theme. So I decided to go with the Sampu for that reason. I mean, I guess the SUG works in that regard as well. But I just really wanted to use Sampu, to be honest. It's a nice, good, like, fast stagger generator. It's really quite nice in that regard, right? And yeah, that's about all there is to say about the weapons. Let's move on into the frame. Now, I've made 2 changes to the frame, and starting with the Mind Beta head, which I switched from the original Mesa head. And kind of the thing here is that, just by putting on some extra weight, we get a lot more attitude stability, right? It's a significant attitude stability increase, and it's not a huge mobility loss. 2 boost speed is basically nothing, right? And we just get an overall very nice defensive upgrade, of course. I guess, our explosive defense is a little worse, but, it is what it is. If the attitude stability increases really, really nice. Okay, lightweight build, we're already pretty low on the attitude, right? And moving on, we've got the Mind Alpha core. I didn't switch this. This is a pretty solid core all around for its weight. It's got good defenses and good generator stats. This is a solid core. Really nothing to complain about with it. Now moving on, we've got the VP46D, which is the other change. Now this one isn't quite so mandatory, or I guess needed, as when I often put on these arms. It's usually because it's a big difference, right? But in this case, it's kind of more of a minor change. But the extra firearm specialization and melee specialization is pretty nice for just like guaranteeing, like securing a kill. So I did decide to switch to the VP46D, but honestly, you can stick with the Mesa arms and it really not make a big difference, right? It's only a small difference. Obviously, you could consider using the Basho arms. Your Sampu is obviously going to be less consistent, but you will do, silly amounts of damage with the plasma thrower. But I decided to just stick with the reliable VP46D, right? I mean, the Mesa arms are really good as well, but they just fall a little bit short of the VP46Ds in terms of offensive stats. Now, finally, we've got the Mesa legs. These are pretty solid, lightweight legs. Very, very low weight, low energy load, and I guess for their weight, the defenses could be worse. Obviously, they're not the best in that regard, but they are very lightweight, very fast legs, right? They do have a decent load limit. All things considered, it could definitely be worse. It could be like this. Yeah, for me, the legs pretty solid all around. Moving on, let's get into the internals. Getting internals, starting with the booster, of course, we've got the Alulas. Now, originally, he has on the POS SPD, and I've, of course, switched these out for the Alulas, mostly for the just way better quick boost stats, right? Way faster quick boost, shorter quick boost for load time. We do lose a little bit of boost speed, but it's not enough to make a big difference. Probably like the biggest loss here is actually assault boost energy consumption, right? Because the Alula here just absolutely drains energy while assault boosting. But we do get faster assault boosts as well. We're just kind of faster all around despite the lower boost speed, right? So, it's a very, very nice upgrade in that regard, right? Now, moving on, we've got the Talbot FCS. Main reason here is this build is basically purely close range and missile lock correction, right? So, I considered the Oculus, but I'm going to be frank, even though it's not a huge, 18% difference, it felt really significant for some reason to me with the Javelin. I think it's because, the reload time compared to the lock-on is like relatively short, right? That having such even extending the lock-on by just a little bit felt really bad to me. So I ended up sticking with the Talbot. But if the lock-on time of the Javelin doesn't bother you, you could totally go with the Oculus, and you're going to have, better tracking while locked on, right? And, that said, we have really good arms anyways for firearm specialization, so it doesn't really matter that much regardless. Now, finally, for the generator, we've, of course, got the Hokushi. Guys are all familiar with this generator by now. I'm sure it's incredibly, incredibly good. Great energy output for its weight. And there wasn't really much else I considered. He originally has on the Mingtang, and it does have a faster recharge delay, but it's got a fairly low energy capacity. And, the Alulas are not the nicest on the energy consumption per boost, right? So I wanted definitely to have a bigger energy capacity for sure, even if it's just a little bit. And just way better energy supply efficiency. Well, one thing really nice, we have super high supply efficiency on this build, thanks to the Mind Beta core, right? So the moment that recharge delay, finishes, you're just back to full energy, basically instant, right? And it's really, really nice in that regard. Probably the only other thing I would have considered using would be the sand type, but it's just kind of too heavy for this build, right? Or rather, it's just too heavy for this build, and that's what it is. Now for the expansion, he originally had it on the pulse armor. Personally, I'm an assault armor enjoyer, at least compared to pulse armor, right? In terms of like PvP meta, if you wanted to use this build in PvP, pulse armor is definitely probably going to be the way to go, but I'm personally an assault armor enjoyer, or even a thermal armor enjoyer. In terms of PvP, I always use thermal armor personally, because I don't want to deal with expansions. I don't know how often I've talked about it, but I really don't like the expansions in PvP. I wish they just weren't even in PvP at all, personally. But it is what it is. Definitely for PvE, I would definitely go for assault armor though. And yeah, that's all there is to say about the build. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video. Before we get into the gameplay footage, a quick thank you to our members. As always, any amount or any tier of the membership is greatly appreciated. You get some benefits, of course. Get your name here. You if you do the purple cat tier or higher, you get to see the videos a day early, and there's some other stuff, right? But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the gameplay footage.
Wait! Let's not do anything hasty! You realize I lead the Vesper 7th squad, which means I hold the purse strings. Every single transaction goes through me. Let me go, and you'll still come out on top. Understand? You're quick on the uptake, aren't you? Splendid. I'm sure Snail will see you're properly honored for this. You're not like those savages. Keep up the good work.
Death and dishonor, such as the Oathbreaker's due. Pay the sons who toil!
Is that a revelation from TC? Prepare to intercept.
Scoundrels, prophets, coin slipping from cold fingers. Feed Rubicon's soil.
AP at 50%. AP at 30%. 2 repair kits remaining.
Gather data on the enemy Rokumonsen, the assassin associated with the Rubicon Revelation project. Don't let me confuse you with the evidence. Zero Point Mark.
I shall pay my dues. Watch me, good comrades, heed me, Oathbreaker. Treachery benefits none. Take you there.
Confirmed. Enemy AC destroyed. That was certainly an adventure. This is our opportunity for an ambush. Let's go.
What do you think you're playing at? Wait! You're not one of mine! Another ambusher? Wait, no, please! Yeah!
Confirmed. Target destroyed.